You're on.
On the air. Here we go.
CFNY FM 102.1, the spirit of radio.
I remember that. It's a hard life.
And David, that was me hitting the closing theme. I am so nervous to be in your presence. I hit the closing theme, the wrong button. I didn't hit the intro.
Do you want to go from the top?
No, because this is authentic, David.
Oh, okay.
This happened, man. I want the world to know. I screwed up. Welcome to episode 1565 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Learn how to plan, invest, and live smarter. Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd is David Marsden. David, how are you?
Hi, Mike. This is like incredible. It's been a long, long, long time since I've been here in your magnificent studios.
Well, it's been almost 10 years because your visit, my friend, firstly, when I took the photo with you, normally I do it after the recording, but I'm like, I saw your hair and I'm like, I need a photo with David Marsden. That's all real, right? This hair.
That's all real.
That's unbelievable.
Well, during COVID, I couldn't get my stylist in Yorkville was closed. Nothing
Is it
was
Gary
open.
Chowan?
Huh?
Who's your stylist? Gary Chowan?
No, no.
Okay, just checking in.
But so I couldn't get anything done, so I just said, well, I'll just let it grow. And, well, grow it did, and I haven't cut it since.
Well, I saw you on a Zoom. So let me set the table here.
Yeah,
so you were here January 2015, almost 10 years ago. You have just set the record for the longest gap between appearances on Toronto Mic'd. So congratulations, David. Do you want me to read what the description I wrote at the time when we dropped that 106th episode?
I'll leave that up to you. You're the host.
I'm the
You're
host.
the boss.
I'm the boss around here, David.
But before we start, I want to say something.
Yeah, please.
You know, I don't know. It was 10 years ago that I was here, apparently, and you'd probably been going for a year or so before I came in, or a matter of months.
About a couple of years, but only 105 episodes before yours.
Well, you know, the biggest thing today, and broadcasters know this, but the biggest thing today in the world, internationally, are called podcasts. And guess who started it? You.
Wow.
You, Mr. Mike. You were the first one in. And here you are now. You've built up this incredible following. You've got all kinds of sponsors and people helping you with keep it going financially. But you're the one who puts the energy and the creativity and all the other things that belong in a podcast. So I give you a standing ovation.
Well, thank you, David. And, you know, many people inspired me, but one of the people who inspired me without a doubt is you and what you did at CFNY and what you're doing at nythespirit.com. I mean this sincerely. I can, you know, there's a few people that were instrumental in kind of giving me that spark to do what I want to do here. And I literally, if I look back 10 years, there was a documentary called I Play What I Want. Do I have the right title? What's the title? I know, it's something like that. Like, I Play What I Want, something like that, right? Roger King.
You're
right?
talking about the movie.
The documentary, yeah.
I Play What I Am or something?
Oh, something like that. But bottom line is, you know, you, and we'll cover some of this ground. A lot of people, I'm going to read the description for episode 106 in a moment, but you have standards, and if you don't like the narrow playlist at Chum FM, you walk away. If things change at CFNY and you no longer feel you can play what you want, you walk away. Like, you're a huge inspiration when it comes to Toronto Mike.
Well, I guess I haven't done it on purpose. It's just what I believe. I take it, I started when I was like 14 or 15 is when I first started listening to the radio, and I was listening to people like Dick Biondi out of WLS in Chicago and Cousin Brucey out of WABC in New York. And then when I was traveling in the South, when I lived in Arkansas, I would listen to John R. do the all-night show out of WLAC out of Nashville. That's where I learned to love the blues, by the way. And I was a teenager when all that was happening, and I was enthralled with the music because in those days the variety was very wide, but I was also enthralled with the things that those DJs had to say. I remember John R. at WLAC in Nashville. His commercial was all about baby chicks. I'd like you to buy some baby chicks, and you'd go to the chickens, and in the South that was quite acceptable. But I never forgot about the baby chicks. But so I was always enthralled by that, and that brought me to wherever I am.
Well, where you are now is nythespirit.com, and we'll talk about that. But I have to read this description from January 2015.
That's fine.
In this 106th episode, Mike chats with broadcasting legend David Marsden about his years as David Mickey. That's, of course, at 590. His time at Chum FM, the spirit of radio days at CFNY, his years at Iceberg and The Rock, and then, of course, we talked about nythespirit.com, which you're still active on to this very day. Tears were shed. David, do you remember crying in my basement almost 10 years ago?
No, I don't, but I probably did. I can get quite emotional.
I'm going to see what I can do today. But you're doing well. We did try to do this a few months ago, and you had to postpone, and I'm just checking in on your health here, make sure David Marsden is healthy. You look good.
I had a little heart attack. I called it a heart problem. The hospital called it a heart attack. And that was back in March.
Right.
It was a very freaky. May I tell a little quick story?
Of course. No, tell a long story if you want. You're David Marsden, for goodness sake.
9 years ago, on the night before my birthday's on March the 2nd. On March the 1st, I was doing a show on nythespirit.com.
Right.
And I got a call that Don Burns had died. That was on March the 1st. On March the 2nd, my birthday, we were totally immersed in organizing his affairs and his funeral. This year, that was 9 years ago.
Right.
This year, on March the 1st, I had a heart attack. And I thought back to the 9 years ago. I thought, this is way too freaky for me. If it had been the 70s, I probably would have flown out the window, but because I would have been stoned on something, but
Quaaludes or something. Don Burns, again, 9 years passed, but my sincere condolences, because he's a gentleman I would have loved to have had on Toronto Mike.
You never got him in, eh?
Never got him in. We got him on Humble and Fred, and when I produced that show. We got him on Humble and Fred. There's someone else later I'll be talking to you about who we got on Humble and Fred 10 years ago, but I never did get Don Burns on Toronto Mike.
Well, Don was quite the talker. He could talk.
He could talk.
Like
and
I
he had
just
those great
did.
pipes.
Yeah.
So we did connect again in March 2022.
During COVID. Yes.
It was appropriately enough, episode 1021.
That's right. I remember that.
Not a coincidence, by the way. In this 1021st episode, again, episode 1021, Mike dives deep into the ongoing history of 102.1 CFNY with David Marsden, Ivor Hamilton, Liz Janik, Scott Turner, May Potts, Fred Patterson, Leslie Cross, Alan Cross, Captain Phil Evans, Danny Elwell, Humble Howard Glassman, Robbie J, Rob Johnston, Bob Willett, and Jay Brody. Some of those later cats arrived after you left 102.1, but we went almost 4 hours, and I like to think that episode inspires in some regard. I like to think. You can deflate my ego there if you like, but that inspired this documentary that's been produced and not yet available, but the CFNY doc.
Yeah, I must say I listened to when you did that. I and many of the names you just mentioned are in the Little Yellow House movie. Ivor and Scott, I believe, are exec producers on that movie.
Yeah, maybe Alan Cross too.
I'm not sure, but I really was only there as a guest being interviewed, so I didn't have anything to do with the production. I spoke to the director on email about 3 weeks ago and asked him how it was going in terms of distribution.
What did you learn?
I learned that they are marketing it to festivals across North America and that it will soon be released. That's all I know. I have seen a rough cut.
What do you think of it?
It's magnificent.
Okay, good. Because a lot of people I know are in this doc, or at least were interviewed for this doc. And I think my last update from either Ivor or Scott, could have been both maybe, actually, now that I think about it, but was that they wanted to get this thing out into, to coincide with TIFF, but I guess they couldn't get it into TIFF 2024, so it's delayed a little bit, but I think there's a lot of us who are eager to see you on the screen and this doc.
Well, the thing about TIFF that, and I mentioned this to the director, but the thing about TIFF is that it is connected to another broadcasting company.
I feel like that got who is it? Rogers?
I believe it's Bell. Actually,
Bell, I think, disconnected. I think Bell was in bed with TIFF, and then Bell said peace out, and then I think Rogers said, okay, we'll take that spot.
The problem you get into there, of course, is that when you have another big broadcaster, and are they going to want to promote a film about a radio station or another company? And that's the question and it's only a question. I'm not making accusations. I'm only asking the question.
Well, we all look forward to finally seeing this thing. Again, glad you're here. I'm going to crack a beer, David, because you heard me mess up the intro. I've done this 1,565 times. I've never opened the show with my closing theme in my entire life, but for some reason, coming out of your voice, and I'm hitting the button, and for some reason I hit this button instead of that button. Have you ever in your illustrious radio career hit the wrong button?
Oh, never.
All right.
Never.
Now, and then I got a couple of questions about the heart attack, but let me crack open. Thank you, Great Lakes Beer, for sending this over.
Yes, thank you for leaving me some, as a matter of fact. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, David. You got to have some fresh craft beer there. So let me take a sip here. Talk to me. I want to hear a bit more about this heart attack. Did you what were you feeling that made you go to the hospital?
Well, it was strange. I believe it was in the early morning. For me, early morning is 10, 11 a.m. And I was talking with the co-founder and business partner of nythespirit.com. His name is Igor. He's a financial wizard.
You guys a 50-50 share in this enterprise?
50-50 share.
Nice.
And we were talking on the phone, and I said to him, I said, I'm having a bit of a chest pain. And he said, call 911.
Smart.
And I went, why would I do that? And he said, just call 911. He was getting upset. And can you hit the cough switch a minute?
I can, but yeah, sure.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
That means you're going to have to do an edit or something, I guess.
You must not listen very often to Toronto Mike, because I like the authentic live on the floor. Okay, coughs and all. Please continue.
So anyway, I said, I don't know. And he said, just call 911. And he hung up the phone. So I called 911. They were there within minutes, literally. And the next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance with sirens going.
And I feel like this is the best excuse I've ever heard for not being able to make your Toronto Mike appearance. But this was exactly, because I remember getting the email where you told me you spent your birthday or most of it in the hospital.
Yes,
and we were kind of timing it so that you were here for your birthday. Like, we did that on purpose.
Yes.
But here you are now, David.
Here
and
I am.
You're feeling okay now?
Well, I have to say, they took me over to Western, and it's part of the University Health Network.
Right.
I have never been impressed like I have been with the university, UHN.
I think St. Joe's is part of that too.
Princess Margaret, Toronto General, all the ones along the strip there.
Sure.
But by golly, the nurses, the doctors, even the people who are sweeping the floors, everybody at UHN is dedicated to the hundreds and thousands of people who are in there, and it's just, wow. I was blown away by the efficiency, and I have to attend once a week. I go once a week for exercises and stuff like that.
Well, good to see you. You look amazing. That hair, it blows my mind. I can't wait till people check out our photo. And that first appearance almost 10 years ago was so early in the run of Toronto Mike that I didn't take pictures with the guest back then.
No, you
I
didn't.
think I started at, I don't know when I started, 130 or something, like shortly thereafter. But now you're back, so I got my photo, and that makes me a happy guy. So I have questions from listeners. I have questions.
That's
but
fine.
The first comment, I think, will really launch us as we discuss where people can hear you now before we go backwards a little bit. Buffalo Boy wrote me just to say, I want to let David Marsden know that nythespirit.com is awesome.
Oh.
So let the listeners know, what is this nythespirit.com, and how can people be a part of this experience?
That is so very nice. Thank you, Buffalo Boy. I appreciate that. nythespirit.com, we created it sitting around one afternoon talking about music and what's not being done on radio, and the fact that a lot of people have moved away from old-fashioned radio to this new thing called the internet. And you've got your Spotifys, but what was missing was the spirit of radio. That's why we call it NY The Spirit. It's 24 hours a day. We have 6 DJs. You can listen for 48 hours and never hear the same song twice.
Wow.
The DJs are totally free form. You've mentioned some of their names. Ivor Hamilton, of course. All Night Andre.
Right.
Myself. Scott Eagleson does a show from Vancouver. Earl Jive does a show from Southern California. And Rob Stewart, who is part of a band called Slave to the Square Wave and has produced and remixed a lot of great songs in the last few years. So it's all of these, Danny Elwell was with us for a while. She had to go off and do her thing. And so there's the 6 DJs, and my show, I may start off with AC/DC, but I'll end up with Louis Armstrong.
Right. Because you play what you want.
Yeah, but for me, it's all about texture.
Right.
It's all about, some famous writer said, for Marsden, it's always about the segue.
Is that Marshall McLuhan? Who is that?
No, Marshall McLuhan said something else about Dave Mickey. And you mentioned his name a few minutes ago. I was out for a walk. I have to walk every day for 30 minutes because of this heart thing. But I was out for a walk the other day near where I live. Mm-hmm. And I was walking through a park. And there was a guy sitting on a bench, a park bench. And he looked exactly like a famous French clothing designer, men's clothing designer. But I couldn't remember the guy's name. I still can't. So I walked over to him, and I said, "You look exactly like that famous French men's clothing designer." And he said, "You look exactly like Dave Mickey."
Oh my God! That's because how long has it been since you've been Dave Mickey?
Well, I made the switch when I went to Montreal.
Right.
When I went to Montreal, Don Wall was the guy who hired me at CKGM AM. And at the time, he hired me, and then he said, "Oh, there's just one problem." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, we're not a rock station, and Dave Mickey's name stands for rock. So you're going to have to change your last name. And I thought about that for a minute, and I don't know. I grew up in foster home, a wonderful foster home in Stratford, Ontario. And I met my real mom on 3 different occasions. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just use her last name. But I didn't know how to spell it.
Right, because her last name was Marsden.
That's correct, as in James Scott.
Well, since you brought this up, my condolences on the loss of your brother, James Baby Scott.
Yes.
So much loss since you were last here, and
It's been pretty incredible.
well, I wanted to start. I'm glad that we're here because, for the record, now these are things I learned since your appearance 10 years ago. But you mentioned you were in foster, so your birth mother was a Marsden, and you didn't know how to spell it, so you would assume the name David Marsden.
Yes, correct.
But even Dave Mickey, right, is like Mickey. So Dave Mickey is like Mickie.
That's correct.
But your last name was Mickey, MC, and then a capital Ke.
The Foster family was Michie. It was a Scottish Mickey, it was pronounced.
Okay, so this is a fascinating history. But another kind of interesting tidbit is that, so your brother is James Baby Scott.
Yes. We called him that only because we both had the same similar name at CFNY. And when I hired him to come into CFNY, he was the one who decided to call himself James Scott.
James Scott.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I honestly don't know why. I honestly don't know why. He and I had a very long telephone conversation 2 days before he put on his wings. And we had a very, very intimate, very close conversation. We were half brothers, but we never hung out like brothers. I don't think either of us knew what a brother was, because neither of us ever had a brother, quote, if you will. When I was living in the foster home, I met him once or twice when his mother Mildred and my mother Mildred came to visit, but I was just a little kid. I don't have any recollection of that.
And also interesting to note, and if I'm being too personal, let me know.
That's okay.
But James Baby Scott was actually David, right?
That his name was David as well. Yeah, she named him David for reasons that neither of us know.
Interesting. And it's just fascinating. You were together on the air at 102.1. You're both staples of this Spirit of Radio era at CFNY. Like, so how does your half brother? And I actually hate the word half brother because I have 2 kids who have a different mother than my other 2 kids.
I see.
And if I ever hear half brother, it actually
I
upsets me because
understand.
you're a brother. Okay, don't minimize this with this half
I
brother.
fully understand that.
So I'm passionate about that, David. But how does it come to be that your brother ends up on the air when you're program director at CFY? Like, what's that story?
Well, I don't know why he got into radio. He grew up in London, Ontario. And whether he was inspired by what I was doing, I do not know. We never discussed that. But he started doing radio in London, Ontario. And I honestly don't remember where he was when I decided to bring him into CFNY. I mean, he was very good at what he did. He was much different than what I do, much different. And that was what's important. Be yourself, don't be somebody else. And I honestly, I do not remember how we managed to get together, and I said, why don't you come and join it? He did drive show at CFNY for years.
Yes.
Probably, I would think after Civitas came in is when I brought him in. Prior to that, it was the Allens, and we were still in the little yellow house.
Right.
And then when Civitas took over, we moved down to the offices on Kennedy Road, I think it was.
Yes.
But as I said, we never. I mean, I'm thrilled to say that you have 4 children and that you treat them all the same,
Yes.
and that they treat each other as full brothers. I think that's magnificent. David and I never had that opportunity for whatever reason. I think I was a bit of a secret in the earlier days, but to this day, I mean, I spend at least an hour every day trying to figure out who my father might have been. It's a very hard. You live with it.
And this is important to you.
Oh yes,
it's like a
it's an
missing-
identity thing. I mean, boys are like their dad. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know if I'm like my dad. I don't know who he was.
Well, I don't know who your dad was, but I bet you he had great hair.
It's just funny you say that because when I'm doing a lot of searching on the internet because I'd like to find out who he is before I leave. And one of the things I look for is hair.
Well, it's a unique identifier, if you ask me. So again, I'm glad you cleared all that up. And my one more question, as a younger guy who wasn't listening as often as I should have been, I was probably spending too much time at 680 CFDR listening to Top 40 when I should be on CFNY. But was it a known entity? Like, did people know that you and James Scott were brothers, or was that like a secret?
It wasn't a secret. We never hid from it, but we never talked about it. And as I said, we never really hung out together as brothers. We would visit each other. He'd come up to my place in Caledon, and he had his own children, and he had a wonderful wife, and we would visit, but we never. It wasn't like Christmas morning we'd all get together.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
It wasn't like that at all.
Now, I will say on this show, we did a tribute when James Baby Scott passed away. We did a tribute on this program. I did it with Mark Weisblot, and I did get a note from, I guess it's David Marsden. I guess but James Scott's daughter did reach out to say she loved it, and we had a good chat. And so
he was a wonderful guy, but again, very totally different. We were never influenced by each other because we never spent time together.
It's like parallel.
Unlike the wonderful situation you have where you've got 4 kids and not we, I don't live here, but they all live together
You can live here, David.
They all live together here in this house.
Right.
And so they get to know each other 24/7. They get to know the highs, the lows, the in-betweens.
Right.
And but David and I never did that. It's I mean, when I was 16, 17, I left Stratford and went south with the band, with the Revels.
Well, the band, because a member of that band would go on to be in the band, right? Maybe share that fun fact. I think that's a fun fact that.
Well, when I was about 14, excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat one more time.
Sure, go ahead. I have the cough button at the ready here. Go ahead.
When I was about 14, I decided to start doing dances on Friday nights in Stratford, and I would rent the gymnasium at the Y, and I would hold dances, and people would pay $1 or whatever it was, 75 cents. And they'd come in and I'd play music, and I'd often hire DJs from CKSL in London. Dick McFarlane was one of the ones I brought in the most. Bill Brady was also one of them. Anyway, one day this guy came up to me and he said, I've got this band, this little band, and we kind of like, could you let us play at one of your dances? And I said, yeah, sure, okay. And I said, what's your name? And he said, Richard. And later, of course, I learned his last name was Manuel.
Wow.
And Richard, and so I said, well, come on. So I put them on that stage one of the Friday nights, and the crowd loved them. It was Stratford, little 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. And live music back in the 50s was still a pretty fairly exceptional thing. So anyway, we got to know each other, and John Till was guitar player. John ended up with, go ahead, you say it, Janis Joplin.
Wow.
And Kenny Kalmusky was the bass player. Kenny ended up with Great Speckled Bird, Ian and Sylvia. Jimmy Winkler was on drums, and I don't believe he continued into the music industry. And Doug Rhodes was a singer, and he ended up being a school teacher. So anyway, we got to know each other, and then one day Richard said, why don't you become our manager? And I didn't know what a manager was, what did I know? So I said, sure, I'll be your manager. And then one day I got them booked in an opening at the arena in Stratford, Ontario for Ronnie Hawkins.
Wow, there you go. There you go.
And you want me to keep going?
Well, you know what? I will say that we lost him far too soon, only 42 years old when Richard passed away. And I'm wondering, did you maintain a relationship with him?
Well, the last time I saw him, he came into the UNO Awards to present a Lifetime Achievement to Ronnie. I had called Robbie in L.A., and I said, Robbie, would you come up and do the Lifetime Achievement Award? And Robbie said, David, Beak, Richard's name was Beak, by the way. Beak needs some help. Call him. So he gave me the number. I called Richard he was in Woodstock, New York, living up there. Right. And we arranged for him to come to Toronto. And he was definitely at that point in his life, he was having some trouble. Addiction trouble being one of the biggest. So anyway, that was the last time we talked. And then the next thing I knew, of course, he was in Florida where he hung himself. Richard was an extremely creative fellow. He was unbelievable on keyboards. I think in private life he believed he was Ray Charles, because he used to do Ray like nobody. Even with the Revels, which is lover spelled backwards, by the way. And even with the Revels, when we were all 14 and 15-year-olds, when we went to Arkansas, Ronnie sent us to Arkansas to work in his club called the Rockwood in Fayetteville.
Right.
John Till couldn't go because he was only 14 years old at the time. And so Garth Pico, or Pickett, whichever you want, Garth stepped in as the guitar player. Garth was probably 16. I think I was 17. And Garth had know about the Rebels because we used to play in Goderich every weekend at a roadhouse there. But so off we went, and do you want a quick story? I'll give you one quick story.
Yeah, please, because this is actually coming together. So you mentioned you're the king of the segues, because this is going to lead into a clip I pulled for John Donaby. I'll explain it in a moment, but that ties perfectly with another question for you. And I'm eager to find out, because now that we're in Arkansas, does Levon Helm meet Richard? I'm dying to know what goes on here.
Of course, Levon, all Robbie, all of the... Ronnie said to me one day, he says, I really like this little band you've got, because after we opened in Stratford, he had us opening for him in Grand Bend, he had us opening for him in Port Dover, so we all got to know each other. And then one day, Ronnie said to me, he said, come down and meet with me, and they were staying at the Ford Hotel. Remember that awful place? And so I go to the Ford Hotel, and I walk into the room where they are, and Ronnie Hawkins is lying on one bed, and Robbie Robertson is lying on the other bed.
Right.
I'm 16 years old, and neither of them were wearing any clothes. I didn't know what to do. Well, I knew where to look, but I didn't. So anyway, one quick story in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
We would be the house band at Rockwood, which is Ronnie's club, Monday to Friday. And then on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we would go out and play the frat houses all throughout the South. And we picked up a gig in Memphis, Tennessee. So we left Friday or Thursday night, and we thought we'll go in. I don't remember the exact day, obviously, but we would drive over late at night into Memphis, stay overnight, and then go into the club the next day. We're coming out of Arkansas, and we're going in West Memphis. You cross a long bridge into Memphis City. And we're driving. Ronnie had given us a 1959 pure white four-door Cadillac to drive. And we've got a huge white trailer in behind us. And we're crossing the bridge. We're into Memphis, and all of a sudden we're surrounded by police cars. They pull us over. Let me see. I mean, a bunch of kids driving a brand new Caddy. I mean,
right.
And it was a 59. It had those fins that went up to the ceiling. And could we see your ownership, please? Oops, I forgot it. It's back in Fayetteville. All six of us were arrested.
Wow.
And put in the Memphis City Jail.
Wow.
Garth was 15, so he went into juvenile. The next morning, because I had told them what to do to get the ownership. The next morning, they take us out of we're all in our own little cells. They take us out of our cells, and they take us into the front offices of the area. And one of the guys in a suit, detective or whatever, he starts apologizing. Oh, we're so sorry, boys. We didn't know you were from Canada. My goodness, we're still feeling so bad. And then they said, is there something that we can do to make this up for you?
Right.
We're in Memphis, Tennessee. I look at the guys, they look at me, and we kind of silently send each other a message. I turned to the guy in the suit, the detective, and I said, yeah, there's something you can do. And he said, what would that be? And I said, we want to go to Elvis's house.
Wow. Wow.
He said, hang on a minute. He goes away, he comes back in a minute, he hands me his card, and he said, give this card at the gate at Elvis's house, at Graceland. And, of course, in those days, it was Elvis's house. He lived there.
Yeah, you're in the early 60s here, yeah.
And so off we go to Elvis's house, and we show the card, and those famous gates open up, and we drive on in.
Did you meet Elvis?
Elvis was away shooting a movie. Okay. We spent about 15 minutes or so, I guess, talking to one of the guards at the gate. And the guards all had uniforms, and the badges said EP on them. And then we went on up to the house where we got to spend some time with Elvis's dad.
Oh, yeah.
And he gave us the tour, and we went through the horses. There's a horse area there. And we went through the house, everything.
Wow.
This is a bunch of 16-year-old kids from Stratford, Ontario, having a private tour of Elvis's home.
You've lived a life, Mr. Marsden. Holy smokes. Now, I mentioned John Donaby. Are you friends with John Donaby?
Online, we talk all the time.
Okay, so John was scheduled to be here last week, and he had to postpone.
Yeah.
But I had pulled in all these clips because we were going to cover some ground. He's already been here, but this was going to be sort of like you, as we're going to catch up after many years. But one of the clips I pulled ties in nicely with the next question, but it also you mentioned Ronnie Hawkins.
Yeah.
And so we'll just listen to a bit of this. I won't play the whole thing, just about 30 seconds.
Well, I'll tell you, just a personal thing. Ronnie Hawkins said to mention to you that if you should ever come up here, he's got a nice secret hideaway for you.
I wonder if he's still living in the same place. I had a great time last time.
No, he sold that particular farm, and he's living at another farm at this particular point.
Well, I'd certainly give him a call when I was up there.
Yeah. Tell me, John, let's talk about Walls and Bridges for a moment. I understand the album took roughly 6 weeks to put together?
Yeah, 6 weeks in the studio, 8 weeks from start to getting it into the shops in some of the... I know it's not out there yet, but it's nearly out,
Mm-hmm.
Normally I'm not more than 8 weeks in the studio at a time, because because I find myself getting bored after 8 weeks, you know?
Are you one of those people that feel if you can't get it in the first few takes, it's perhaps not worth it? Or
Yeah, I hate going over and over a song, you know? Because you get to hate it, the musicians get to hate it, and it begins to sound stiff, you know? I like to catch myself and the musicians.
Whose voice is that? Do you recognize that voice?
Well, that's Mr. Lennon.
That's Mr. Lennon.
Yes.
And John Donaby. By the way, John Donaby was at the last waltz. Did you get a chance to go attend the last waltz?
I did not. I know John really well, obviously, and he's a very warm and wonderful individual. But no, I did not. I was in Vancouver, I think, when the last waltz happened.
Right. So now the question that came in from John Maxwell, he said, I have a question for David Marsden. Please ask David if he encountered John Lennon back in 1969 during his bed-in for peace in Montreal. I think it lines up with David Marsden's time on the radio in Montreal. I'm very curious to know.
I spent 3 days with John Lennon in the bedroom. Well, it was a suite. It was a very interesting weekend. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
I didn't stay overnight, but I did spend 3 days there. I met the likes of Timothy Leary, who was a most interesting character. Al, somebody or other, he did a cartoon. I can't remember his last name. Anyway, one of the Smothers was there, was Smothers
Probably
Brothers.
Tommy, right? I feel like that's a Tommy thing.
And of course, Mr. Lennon was there. And the first day I was there, there was a DJ set up in the bedroom, and he was doing his show from the bedroom with the John Lennon piece in. And every 3 or 4 minutes he would blah, 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 and Lennon was getting fed up. He was gone the next day. I can't remember his name, but it was CFOX AM radio. They didn't have the FM in those days.
Right.
But yes, I was at CKGM at that time. I have quite a few thoughts on that weekend together with John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Well, did you want to share anything here, any of those thoughts now, as I'm capturing as many Marsden stories as I can? Like, did you want to drop? Do you want to share any of those stories with John Lennon? That's wild that you spent that much time with a Beatle. Like, that's incredible. That's incredible.
It was a positive weekend, but it was also a negative weekend.
But how was it a negative weekend?
With all due respect to John, he could occasionally be not the nicest guy in the world. I witnessed something that bothered me greatly. It was on the Sunday, I believe, and there were constantly people in and out all weekend long. It was a parade of people who had been invited or for whatever reason. And they would come in and they would meet Lennon and Yoko, and they would get pictures, and then they'd go away, and then there'd be somebody else come in. And at one point, and I don't even know if I should tell this story, but apologies if I offend anybody. At one point, there were 3 or maybe 4 chaps came in, young gentlemen, but all 3 or 4 of them were blind. And they were brought in, and when they were taken to the foot of the Lennon Yoko bed, because they pretty much stayed in that bed all weekend. They didn't get up. Every now and then, there was a little kid there. They would get up and play around with the little kid. I don't know who the little kid was. Anyway, these 4 fellas, at the foot of John Lennon's bed, and all 4 of them, they were blind, so they knelt down on their knees, and they had their arms against the edge of the mattress. And Lennon, oh God, I'm really nervous about telling this story. I've never told this before. He got out of the bed and he went over he was kind of on his knees, just crawling along on the mattress, and he got quite close to the 3 or 4 of them. They could not see him. And he said, "So, you all came to see John Lennon and you can't?" And then he laughed like that. And I thought, okay, I think he meant it as a joke, but to me it wasn't funny. But he had moments like that. Do I respect his talent? Oh, absolutely. Do I respect the fact that, he did many, many things with both the Beatles and himself and others? I respect it very highly. But it was little incidents like that happened throughout the weekend. I won't get into any more of them. That was one of the easier ones to tell.
Well, David, they say never meet your heroes. Although I've met you, and you're as advertised. So
I was wondering about that right away. I was like, what?
Wow, no.
I'm nobody's hero.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I was braced for where it was going, and
I hope it wasn't. I mean, I maybe I built it up. But
well, I did brace myself, and I was prepared for worse. So I think what that does do is you're like a little relieved that it was a bad joke.
Yeah, it was a bad joke, and Lennon was a very nice guy, generally. And I did manage to stay there for 8 or 9, 10 hours each and every day for 3 days. And I met some wonderful people. And it was an interesting weekend, let's put it that way.
I feel like that child might have been Yoko Ono's daughter from, not with John, but from a previous relationship.
Yeah, I think it was a daughter. At one point, she didn't like her ice cream cone, so she mushed it into the carpet holder.
I just fairly recently, this past summer, Sir Jerry Levitan dropped by. And when Sir Jerry was 14 years old, he interviewed John Lennon at the King Eddie Hotel. And it's a great story, actually. He tells it vividly. It's a wonderful story about his time with John Lennon. And he did talk about Yoko Ono's daughter being there. And that's probably who you saw there. And if anyone wants more John Lennon stories, dig up that Jerry Levitan episode. It's quite something. It's in the Toronto Mike feed.
It should be noted that was the King Eddie, but the one I was at was in Montreal.
Yes, you were absolutely the bed in Montreal. Now, question for David Marsden from STM. So this came in from STM.
I wonder what that stands for. Oh, I could make up all kinds of things.
Stone Temple Mike. No, I don't know. Avid. I got to read this line. This is important, David. Avid listener of your podcast for many years. Okay, so that he pumps my tires because he knows if you do that, I will read the question. Thank you. Question for David Marsden. Please ask him to finally tell the story about David Bowie and Iggy Pop in the back of a limousine in Toronto, presumably in 1977 when they played at Seneca College. He has teased this tale in the past. Maybe he'll finally share it with you.
No,
thanks.
Nick Charles. You may remember Nick Charles. He used to do the overnight weekends at CFNY back in the day. When he wasn't doing the overnight weekends, he was a chauffeur driver.
Right.
And one of the people that he drove for an extended period of time was indeed David and Iggy. They were in Toronto together. I don't recall whether either of them was appearing in Toronto or whether they were just here, because they used to travel the world and just enjoy the culture and so on.
Right.
I will only say this, and I only know this story because Nick told me. I think he felt comfortable telling me this story. That was a hint right there. About David and Iggy in the back seat of the limousine on several occasions. I spent a lot, when we did the first police picnic. Remember the police picnics?
I'm actually moderating a panel discussion with Gary Topp on December 1st.
Tell Gary I said hi.
He's got a new book coming out.
Does
You
he?
should be part of this panel discussion, actually. Ivor's going to be there.
Gary is great. Gary is a wonderful guy, and both Garys, actually. And
Yeah. Gary Cormier's invited. We just don't have confirmation. He'll be there.
yeah, he lives way out in the country somewhere.
Right.
Anyway, when they did the police picnic, CFNY was the presentation station, and I was given a golf cart to ride around with. So I spent pretty much the entire afternoon riding around in my golf cart, doing interviews and so on. But the guy sitting beside me for the entire time was Iggy Pop. So we had some fun. The story about the two of them in the limo, you'll just have to leave that one to your imagination.
Maybe your third appearance on Toronto Mike. I'll shake that one out of you. All right, here's a note that came in from Mike Hannafin.
Oh, hi, Mike.
Mike is in British Columbia right now. He's listening, and it's a very nice note from Mike. I want to read it in its entirety here. One of the most important days of my life was in November 1983 when Fred Patterson brought me into CFNY to meet David Marsden for an interview for a new sportscaster job being created in the spring of 1984. I had worked 3 years as a sportscaster at a tiny station in Stratford, but grew up listening to Marsden and listening to CFNY. David didn't know me, but it must have gone well because after 30 minutes, he turned to Fred and said, I like this guy. And my career path was changed forever.
Aww.
David didn't know much about sports.
No.
But he did recognize passion for broadcasting and what would work for his radio station. I'm forever grateful. Mike Hannafin.
Thank you, Mike Hannafin. That's very nice. The radio station you worked for in Stratford was called CJCS. And I tried to get hired there several times, and they just said no. But thank you, Mike Hannafin. I appreciate that. I really, really do. It means a lot. And you've done very well. The fact that you've done so well had nothing to do with that interview, by the way. It had to do with Mike Hannafin.
You are so right, but you helped open the door so he could be the most Mike Hannafin he could be.
Well, he's a great talent, and he's right. I don't know a lot about sports.
No sports talk on this episode.
I've recently become a bit of a fan of soccer.
Well, that's a sport.
Yeah, I've become a bit of a fan. I've been watching it on TV and so on.
It's a beautiful game.
Yes.
Okay.
I spoke to somebody the other day. I said I really would like to somehow or other get tickets for the upcoming
World Cup.
FIFA.
Yeah. That'll be still be games at BMO Field, but apparently, because money ruins everything, you can't call it BMO Field during this. Like, it can't be called BMO Field. I guess there's another bank sponsor or something in FIFA land, so it'll be called like Toronto Stadium or something like that.
Well, maybe if we're really nice, they'll give us tickets.
Well, David Marsden, you should be able to just pick up the phone. I feel like somebody at MLSE will take you. Somebody at MLSE, a high-ranking executive, grew up loving the spirit of radio on CFNY, and hearing David Marsden's voice, they would say, how many tickets do you need, Mr. Marsden?
I would hope that might be true, but I don't take it for granted.
Well, I do soon, because I've been waiting almost 10 years, David, to get you back here, and I have some important questions here, but I will soon be asking you about the current state of Toronto radio, and that's coming soon. But maybe you could help me with like what I call like a missing link. So yeah, there is a documentary on the on CFNY and the spirit of radio, and that's coming. But I have my own, for the last 12 years, I'm doing the math in my head. Yeah, over 12 years on this show, I've been kind of putting together pieces. And I'm wondering, would you take a moment to flesh out the backstory of how you found Chris Shepherd and how he was anointed, I guess finding out how you found Chris Shepherd and brought him into CFNY, and then if you have any idea where the heck he is, because the last public appearance from Chris Shepherd was on, I mentioned earlier, I missed Don Burns on Toronto Mike. Well, we got Chris Shepherd on Humble and Fred in 2014, 10 years ago.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to find him since to get him on this program. But what can you tell us about the discovery of Chris Shepherd and where you think he might be today?
Before I do that, I want to make one correction because my good friend, my pal Roger King, will not like me if I don't give the correct night
Okay, what's it
title.
called?
I am what I play.
And what were we calling it? I play what I want.
I think you got it. We both got it confused for the moment because it was just pure excitement.
It was a great talk, Roger, and
it was fantastic.
Your segment was my favorite because you're David Marsden.
It still is. It's on Vimeo and all those places.
It's fantastic.
Now,
but your hair wasn't as long as it is.
Now about
Chris Shepherd.
Chris Shepherd. Well, I was doing Saturday nights, and my programming responsibilities have become greater and greater and greater, and it was just too much for me. I had to focus 5 days a week, and then I had to focus on the sixth day to do my radio show on CFNY on Saturday night. And so I decided that I had to leave the show in order to focus on the programming and the building of the things and the building of the UNOs and all the rest of that. And so I've been hanging around some of the dance clubs a bit just for fun, and I thought maybe that would be cool. There's no DJ anywhere that I know of anywhere in the country playing dance music. So I would take my Friday nights and I would go from club to club to club in Toronto listening to all these DJs. And the one who caught my attention was playing at a little club over at Avenue Road in Davenport. I think it was called the Blue something or other. I don't remember. Anyway, there was a guy playing there and he caught my eye. He caught my attention. He caught my ear, everything. And I went up, I introduced myself to him, and I said, could we have a meeting? And he said, sure, I'm Chris Shepherd. We had a meeting. He came out to the radio station a couple times, and I decided that Chris Shepherd was going to get that very, very important Saturday night, 8 till midnight.
Yeah.
And so we were all set, and for his first night there, I was at the station to make him feel comfortable. And about an hour before the show, he came into my office. Now, Chris at that time was just a young guy. I don't know how old he was, but he was just like this innocent young fella. And he sat down, and I said, how you feel? And he said, David, I don't know how to do radio. I've never done it before. And my thought was, you should have told me this earlier, but right. I didn't say it. I said, just be yourself. Just do what you do, the same as what I saw that night in the club.
May I ask a quick question? When you saw him in the club, did he have that vocal affectation?
No.
So when you said be yourself,
well,
he invented a persona.
That became himself.
Okay, he just changed who himself was.
Yes.
I understand. I just found it interesting that he's kind of sounded like he might be British maybe, but of course was not.
No, it all developed over a period of weeks / months. And he became enormous. I mean his popularity was like over the roof. His ratings, well, like what can I say? The corner office loved me.
I can tell you, I'm of an age where we would record a cassette, the Chris Shepherd all night live airs there, and it was a huge. We'd trade these cassettes in the schoolyard. Yeah. Like this is what we did. This was our torrent network. Now another question, hard hitting questions here. So he hadn't yet introduced the Chris Shepherd way of speaking, but was he Chris Shepherd? Is Chris Shepherd a stage name?
Chris Shepherd is his real name as far as I know. Okay. I was sort of never led to believe otherwise. I think his checks were written to Chris Shepherd.
All right. It's a good name.
The persona that he developed and the various accents, interestingly enough, those developed while he was on the air. However, as he developed them, he would use them off air. So it wasn't like he was phony. That was him. That was what he believed.
His persona.
As for his disappearance,
well, just again, I'm a firm believer that if somebody doesn't want to be found, leave them alone. Okay,
Yeah.
we all have the right to disappear. You know, I hope you don't, but if you wanted to disappear, I respect that. Okay, so if Chris Shepard, because I get notes like, oh, he's in Costa Rica or whatever. So if he's gone to Costa Rica and he's off the grid and he doesn't want to be found, then enjoy your life, Mr. Shepard. That's what I say. I'm not going to show up in Costa Rica and hunt him down and make a documentary searching for Shepard, okay, despite how much money they throw at me. But what do you know, David Marsden, about the whereabouts or the well-being of Chris Shepard in 2024?
I notice you've already got a title for the program. It's called Searching for Shepard.
Sure, maybe Searching for Shep. I'm still workshopping it.
I know that he has, quote, disappeared. That's pretty much all I'm going to say. There were certain developments in his life when he left the DJ business, and he just decided that he wanted to be left alone. And
Interesting.
So that's all I will say about it.
Now I know far less than you know. So I know nothing. I know nothing. How's that? But allegedly, now this is just possible. Is there any possibility he had issues with the mob, or are these like urban legends that people toss around? Like maybe that business of, DJing, there was a lot of cash business sometimes with mafioso, and maybe he owes somebody, the wrong person, the money and he needed to disappear. Allegedly. I have no idea. Well, you want me to mute you? Okay.
No, not at all. I know nothing like that.
Okay. We'll leave it right there before we both end up with cement shoes. Okay, David, I don't want to sleep with the fishes, so I'm going to leave that right there. I know what happened to Luca Brasi.
I don't think he's in any kind of situation like that.
Okay. Well, that was the ending of my doc, so there goes that. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. They're proud sponsors of the show. David, again, you're looking great, and it's okay if I say your age, right? Are you?
Do you know how old I am?
84 years old.
Actually, I'm 83. I'm young.
I was given bad intel. Okay.
I was
83.
born in 41.
41. Okay.
Yes.
And of course, we know March 2nd.
I was born in the city of Toronto.
What hospital?
Well, it was a little hospital over. It became Wellesley General, but before it was Wellesley General, I believe it was a home for unwed mothers or something like that.
But not Women's College Hospital.
No.
Okay.
No. I came out and the doctor looked at me, and we're over there at Wellesley, and he said, "Henceforth, this shall be known as the gay village."
I thought he was going to remark on your hair.
I probably should. You might want to edit that out. I don't know.
No, I love it. Listen, I love it. Okay. I'm going to edit nothing out. Okay. Now, one fun fact about you, and then I'm going to thank a couple of sponsors, and then there's some people that you worked with I want to ask you about. We talked about your brother, James Baby Scott, but I do want to point out the fact that I once invited you back to kick out the jams, which means we play and discuss your 10 favorite songs of all time, and you very politely told me that you don't believe in these lists.
Oh, no, I don't know. That's true.
So no top 10 list for David Marsden.
It depends on what day it is. It depends on what hour it is. I mean, it's that
Right.
open.
And I respect that. I know on your website you can go to a place like, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it. Maybe it says top 100 songs of all time or something, and it's a blank page. Like it's like you're letting the world know this is an impossible task, and I will not participate in this. All right, I'm gonna again. I'm so sorry for doing this.
That's
My
okay.
condolences. But there's some people I want. Since you were here almost 10 years ago, a number of these CFNY personalities have, as you would say, put on their wings.
Yes.
Some of them I had the good fortune of chatting with. Some I never got to meet. But I'm going to just run down a list, and hopefully you'd say a word or two about each of these individuals. Jim Reed.
Jim was...
Jim?
Jim, rather, sorry. That was recent, actually.
Yes.
Jim and I had talked several times. He used to listen to my shows on NY The Spirit. He was he did middays at CFNY for the entire time I had it. He was gentle. He was human. He was real. And he was a pretty fine on-air talent for middays. He was also an incredibly fine father. I believe his 2 sons are living out in British Columbia now. I'm not sure. When he left us, I believe I had a nice chat by email with his wife. And he and I had talked quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit, but we had talked before he put on his wings.
I knew he had great taste in content because not only would he listen to nythespirit.com, but he was an avid listener of this very podcast. And I had many a note from Jim Reed. I never got to meet him in person, but I also had a nice chat with his wife upon his passing when I spoke about it on this program. And another gentleman I wish I had on this program.
I'm going to stop you for a minute because I want to tell one quick.
Yeah, please.
Reed story.
Yeah, please.
I was sitting in my office. Jim was on the air. I had my system going, my speakers, and the entire newsroom was in a complete and absolute flurry. They didn't know what to do. It was the day that the spaceship went down.
Challenger.
Challenger. Everybody in the building was going crazy. I'm listening to Jim Reed talk about it. And he goes into a song. And the song was called Watch Them Die Live on TV, which I believe is by The Box. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, no, God, no, that wouldn't be the one to pick.
Right.
But there was nothing I could do at that point. You can't rush in and take it off because then it becomes obvious. Right? He meant that song genuinely because that's what he was, a genuine human being with a lot of emotion and love.
Absolutely. Peter Goodwin.
That's interesting. Peter Goodwin and I went to a funeral. Mr. Evanoff, who owned the radio stations, Peter was working at Evanoff Broadcasting. And I went to Mr. Evanoff's funeral. And Liz Janik was there, and a few others, quite a few others, actually. And at one point, I went over and I talked to Liz. We had a little chat and so on and so forth. And there were 4 or 5 in the group with Liz, and we chatted. And I can't remember exactly how this happened, but it was sort of like this. Liz said, "Have you said hi to Peter?" Who, of course, was Liz's husband. And Peter said, correctly, "I don't think he remembers who I am," because I did not. And at that point, we went off. Peter and I sat down at the table. This was after the funeral service. And we had a lovely chat. Peter and Liz, I believe they met at CFNY.
I believe so.
They fell in love, and they had a wonderful, I believe, son. Peter was, if I'm looking for adjectives, humble, genuine, and very much in love with Liz.
Brad McNally.
Oh, my goodness. Brad McNally was at CFNY, even in the little yellow house. When I first arrived, he was there. I remember at one point we were all at some kind of an event. We were at his home, I think, at an event. And he announced, he said, "I'm moving. I'm leaving CFNY and I'm moving." And I said, "Where are you going?" And his wife said, "I'm going back home." His wife was from Australia.
Right.
But then Brad said, "Well, but before I go there, I'm going to Sweden." And he became a pretty big deal at Swedish Broadcasting.
Yeah, he programmed like 12 stations in
Yes,
Scandinavia.
he became a very big deal in Scandinavian broadcasting. And then off they went to Australia, where he also became a very big deal in Australia radio.
Yeah, in Perth, yeah.
And when we opened up nythespirit.com, I invited him to join us. And join us he did. And he did shows there for a year or so, I think. And then he felt quite ill. But he would send his shows in from Australia. And by then he had developed a little bit of an accent. And he was jolly. He drove a yellow Mustang, which he was very proud of. He sold that Mustang to one of the music directors, Eddie Valakat, who bought the car but didn't have a driver's license. So I don't think it ever got driven. I don't really know. He was quirky. And I use that adjective very kindly. He was unusual. He was different. He was dynamic. He was a person that it was fun to be with. But at the same time, when it was time to do the eclectic spirit, he became a very, very serious guy. And the eclectic spirit program tested more listeners' ears and took people places they never thought they could possibly go. That's Brad McNally.
Do you remember the song Working on the Radio?
Of course. I still play it. I still play it on my show. What came about there is that the Allens had lost the station, and the station was being held by the CRTC, and there were 6 or 7 applicants trying to buy it. And I started a petition to make sure that the CRTC would give the station to somebody who would maintain the Spirit of Radio alternative format that we had developed. And we had literally thousands and thousands of names. Kids were setting up in their high school, and kids would sign these petitions. And Brad, unbeknownst to me, decided that he had to do something too. And that's when he pulled together the Teenage Head and all these other people, and they created the song Working on the Radio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just recently saw discussions about that song, I think maybe between Scott Turner and Ivor Hamilton, and I wrote about it on my blog, torontomike.com. But yeah, not to bury the lead there, yeah, but Brad McNally and Jim Bird, I believe, are the writers.
They were the instigators. Ivor was very involved. But the funny thing was, I didn't know anything about that. I was busy doing on-the-air petitions. Please send letters, please, blah, blah, blah.
Your call to arms, which people can hear about in episode 106 when I played it. I think that was one of the tears I got. Absolutely. Was Nash the Slash involved in recording that song?
I think so, but I can't be a positive. Nash was a very good friend of mine, but I'm pretty sure he was involved. I know a couple of the Teenage Heads were involved. Working on the radio, as I said, I don't play it often, but I still play it from time to time on my show.
I will shout out Colin Brunton, who is booked and will be on Toronto Mike making his debut soon. He's been trying to raise money for a Nash the Slash documentary.
That is correct.
So we'll be talking more about Nash the Slash with Colin Brunton very soon. And I was introduced to Colin because I spent a lot of time every month for episodes of Toast. I have Rob Pruce in the studio.
Yes.
And I want to say hi to Rob because, of course, you mentioned the Police Picnic.
Yes.
The Spoons played the Police Picnic, and, of course, no CFNY, no Spoons, and Pruce was the keyboardist during their heyday.
Yes. Well, I saw your pictures, actually, of you and Rob.
Every month.
And he's still doing some mixing of other music.
Yes, Church of Trees and things, and works with Carol Pope on different projects.
That is correct.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a big Bruce head over here. So he's no Marsden, but he's right up there. Right up there.
When I was in New York, just prior to COVID, I went to see ABBA, which of course Rob was music director.
Yes, that's exactly what he was up to back then.
And what a good night it was. And after the event, Rob and his wife and myself and Igor, we all got together and had a late night dinner after the show. And they're both just the sweetest people you've ever imagined.
Amazing. I'm gonna ask Bruce about that dinner next time he's over in November.
We had a lovely evening. It was around midnight, of course, because the show didn't get out till 10:30 or so, and then they have costume change and whatnot. But it was so exciting to sit in the audience on Broadway, one of the biggest shows I've ever known to man or woman, called ABBA, or what was it called?
I think
it was the music of ABBA, but it was called something.
Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia.
That's the one, Mamma Mia.
And look down there, and there in the pit was my pal and my associate and my friend, Rob Bruce. That was pretty exciting.
Love that so much. Let me check in with you here. How you like? Am I okay to go a little longer? I know.
I'm open-ended.
Are you sure? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, let me tap your head if you need a bio break because I'm killing you here. Okay, just a little more.
Is that what you call them now?
Yeah, I thought that was a nice way to say it.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna say, don't ask him if he has to take a piss. Okay. It's David Marsden.
If I put on a 10-minute track, you'll know why.
Although I'd be honored if you want to pee on the rug. That's fine with me here. Few more names I would like to shout out
absolutely
quickly here. Palma Pasta. Do you enjoy Italian food, David? Is that on the list of Marsden dinners?
I have to tell you the truth.
You tell me the truth. I don't want you to bullshit me.
You said Palma Pasta, but I thought we were still doing eulogies.
Well, we are. I'm taking a break. I think the Bruce was a great moment. Bruce still with us, looking great.
Yeah, that's not a eulogy.
So we're taking not a eulogy. No shout out to Ridley Funeral Home.
Hopefully for a long, long time.
We're coming back to the eulogies. Absolutely. Okay. I'm just gonna let you know I have a lasagna in my freezer for you from Palma.
Oh, I see.
If you want it, I would love to give it to you. And you already got the beer.
Is that what's in here?
Well, that's the empty box, and then I have it in my freezer. So
may I take it home, or do I have to eat
no,
it
it's
with
frozen
you?
solid. You'd break your teeth. So you bring it home. And that speaker,
Palma Pasta.
Palma Pasta. I need to tell the listenership that on November 30th at noon, and David, you're invited to this too, at Palma's Kitchen, we're all going to get together and record a live session, festive session. It's going to be amazing.
Where is this now?
So this is in Mississauga.
Boy, it looks great. Look. Oh, I'm serious.
It's in my freezer. I'm no BS on this program, David. I'm going to give you a lasagna from Palma Pasta. You got the beer. That speaker there, that's from Maneras, because you're going to listen to season. Where are we at now? My goodness gracious. We're at season 7. Yeah. Wow. Al Grego went to Winnipeg, and he visited a woman named Katrina Tessier. She owns Scout Coffee and Community, and she shares her journey of opening this unique Winnipeg cafe, providing a welcoming space for parents to relax while their children play. So shout out to season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, the award-winning podcast from Maneras. You can hear that and more. You can listen to nythespirit.com on that wireless speaker there. That's yours.
I've opened the box because I was.
And speaking of Police Picnic, it's called Boxan, right? I think it's.
I see that.
Shout
it's
out
called
to
Boxan wireless
Roxanne.
speaker. There you go. Naturally bold sound.
That's right up your alley.
I should do the commercial.
Well, I loved your House of Lords.
I was going to say I could do it like the House of Lords.
Your name came up recently. Katie Lord was on the program, and she worked at House of Lords, and she shouted out Paul Burford.
Oh, Paul and I still talk quite frequently, mostly on Facebook, actually. We were wishing each other happy Thanksgiving over the past weekend.
Well, we know when I think of House of Lords, I think of your ad spots there for.
I did them for years,
long time, and we miss House of Lords, but it got me there. So you got your speaker.
This is quite an instrument. This Monaris thing. Wow.
Maneras, they do basically when you pay with a credit card at a store or something, it might be Maneras that handles that exchange there. But they're good people. Al Grego went to Winnipeg and brought some great stories back for us.
This wireless speakers, I'm really impressed with this.
Well, if you think that's impressive, wait till you see the Ridley Funeral Home measuring tape right there, David.
I already checked that out. Yeah, I did. I was trying to, with all due respect to Ridley Funeral Home, I was trying to understand the connection between Ridley and
Measuring?
a measuring tape. Yeah.
Well, as it so happens, Brad Jones, who is the funeral director there, he'll be here tomorrow because we record his podcast, Life's Undertaken. I'll ask him for the record. I'll say, David Marsden wants to know, and we'll get an answer tomorrow.
Well, I have to say this too. I stand tall with a thank you to all of those of you who Palmas, Boxan,
Great Lakes Brewery.
I stand tall with all of you for supporting this particular podcast that's worldwide and one of the first.
Thank you, David Marsden.
Thank you, Mike, and
honestly,
thanks to
Mutual
your
Admiration Society. I love it.
Thanks to I really appreciate. I mean, I understand the whole concept of sponsors. We don't have sponsors at NY only because it's a subscription service.
Right. You're like HBO.
Yeah.
you can.
Well, there might be some big announcements coming very soon, but I can't tell you anything.
Oh, see, that drives me nuts when somebody says, I have something big to tell you, but I can't tell you now. I'm like, why did you tell me you had something big to tell me? Now I want to know. I recorded a gentleman, an FOTM named JD. I was on his podcast yesterday, and it was about the Tragically Hip.
Oh, yes.
And I asked him today, I messaged JD and I said, hey, when does this drop? Because I recorded it with him yesterday and I'm excited to hear it in the wild. He goes, oh, I'm going to start this show in January and I don't know when yours will drop. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, is that how other people work? Like your show, David Marsden, before you get home, this show will be in the feed.
Posted.
Yeah, before you get home. So that's how I roll, and others don't necessarily pivot that quickly here. Okay, but I'm going to pivot. I'm going to shout out recyclemyelectronics.ca because, David, if you have a room or a drawer full of old cables or old electronics, don't throw that in the garbage because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and find out where you can drop them off to be properly recycled. All right, now time to get serious. A few more names.
I have a lot of extra things like that.
You need to go to recyclemyelectronics.ca.
I'm excited about this wireless speaker, I got to tell you.
It was worth the trip to New Toronto here. Worth the trip. I didn't have all that swag when you were here the first time.
No, you didn't. I'm excited to go home. I'll see you later.
I think Great Lakes must have heard the David Marsden episode, and that's when they reached out and said, hey, can we sponsor you? But here's known for other things, of course, great musician in a big rock band, but Skip Prokop.
Yes.
Was he a sales? Like, what was Skip doing at CFNY?
Skip had a show. Skip had become quite religious. And I had known Skip all those years with the others at Lighthouse.
Yes.
And we were sitting around one day, and he said, I've got an idea for a show. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, I'd like to do gospel music. And, I lived in the South long enough to know what gospel music really is.
Right.
I said, Skip, are we talking real gospel music or are we talking hymns? Which is it? Because there's a very big difference. Well, we discussed that for a while, and we kind of reached the conclusion that if you're going to do it, it has to be the real gospel, the stuff that warms your heart, the stuff that gives you goosebumps, whatever those are called.
Goosebumps.
Yeah. So he started doing that show on Sunday nights. I think he was either right before or right after Eclectic Spirit with Brad McNally. And I was surprised. It was quite popular. My memory is not all that good sometimes, but I think he was still doing that show when I left and went to Vancouver. What happened after that in the mess that took place, I don't know what happened to Skip. But I was sorry when Skip put on his wings. He was a really fine gentleman. I didn't know him. We didn't hang out, let's put it that way.
And I'm not even sure you overlapped with this gentleman. I did get this gentleman on Toronto Mike, but he shows up, I think, after you go to Vancouver. But did you ever work with Hal Harbour?
I never worked with Hal. I think we may have talked once or twice, but I did not know him as a person.
There is an episode of his real name was Doug Barron, and there's a real episode of Toronto Mike that paid tribute to Hal Harbour, in which Danny Elwell was my guest, Joe Faluna and Danny Elwell. And this is my segue to the current state of Toronto, unless I missed somebody, and it's possible I did miss somebody, but I do. I am curious if you've heard any of Danny Elwell's show that's now airing on Indie 88.
I have not. I have read about it on Facebook. And I think I've seen one of her playlists. I'm not sure, but Danny was with NY The Spirit for about a year, and she's tremendously talented. She worked, of course, at CFNY, but that was after my period of time.
After your time.
Yeah. But I know
Reiner
her,
Schwartz, I think, was her
Reiner Schwartz
director.
was the one who brought her in. They've worked together before.
CKFM, I think.
Yeah. And Danny's a wonderful person. She and I chatted when she was with NY. I got to know her. And I'm happy that she's doing the Sunday nights at NY The Spirit, at Indie 88. Sorry, guys.
Well, listen, this mention of 88.1 gives me a chance to ask David Marsden. Again, you are the man, one of the co-founders of nythespirit.com, and that's where you would, I'm sure you would tell us, that's where the spirit of radio lives in 2024, online at nythespirit.com.
Yes.
Is there any DNA left? I'm going to quote Mark Weisblot, who I brought up earlier, but he says, I keep looking at the Edge playlist, and that's CFNY, everybody. The Edge playlist to see retro curveballs, but nope, these aren't jams that were uniquely CFNY. They're selections from any given alternative Muzak stream. Any overlap with the actual legacy is coincidental. Would you, I don't know if you listened or if you even tune in out of curiosity, but what do you think of the current state of 102.1 and then the newer station in a similar vein, 88.1?
I haven't not listened. However, when Scott Turner was doing Sunday afternoons, this goes back 10, 12 years ago.
Love that show.
Scott was doing, and he was doing the real CFNY formula. And he invited me on to that show. I went in. Danny was there. Ivor was there. May Potts was there. They were all there to say hi. It was quite fantastic. And I spent the afternoon with Scott. At the end of the show, we all decided to go. There's a restaurant in that building where the Edge is located.
On the Grain, maybe?
I don't
It faces the
remember.
lake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went down there to have a little afternoon snack. Dave Farrow, who at that time was the program director, GM, I think, he also came in. It was quite fun. Everybody came in, and so we went to the lunch, and we had a wonderful chit chat and carried on. And at the end of the lunch, I excused myself and I was headed out. And Dave Farrow was sitting at the table, and he hollered at me and he said, I'm going to call you next week. It might be time for us to get together again. And I knew what that meant. And I said, I'm looking forward to that meeting. And unfortunately, it never came to pass. Something or someone got in the way.
But you're not naming names.
No, I can't because I don't know.
That's unfortunate. Every time you think maybe they're making the right move, some corporate entity interferes.
I figure a corporate entity got in the way. Let's put it that way. But
Well,
it wasn't long after that Dave was terminated.
And then not long after that, Spirit of Radio Sundays was terminated.
Yes. I think the problem is that the people, the programmers, they tend to look at the American magazines to see what's popular. And so they think, well, we got to play some 80s music. And let's go. And they go to the American magazine. And, of course, the American magazine doesn't know who Depeche Mode is. They don't know any of that music.
They sure don't know Nova Heart.
No, they don't know any of that. And so it doesn't get played. And that was, it was funny that we're having this conversation because that was the original stimulus, I will call it, the original conversation that I was having with co-founder Igor Lukin, is that all this music's being missed, and it was so popular, it was so monstrous, and it still is. Depeche Mode and all the rest are still touring.
Right.
And that was how we kind of said, why don't we do something? And that was how nythespirit.com was created.
So in your opinion, is there hope for radio, or can you stick a fork in it? Terrestrial radio is done.
There's hope for it, but it's not going to be what used to be. It's going to be something else. It's kind of like when I'm watching the TV news at noon hour or 6 o'clock or whatever. The weather person comes on. They do the weather. Well, I have the weather in my pocket and on your wrist.
Right.
But here's the thing that bothers me, and I don't understand it. The weather person will say, it's a beautiful day, get outside. Well, it's television. That's not good for ratings. Why are you telling everybody to go outside? They should be saying, stay tuned to the news because something really good is coming up.
Right. No, that's funny. I just remembered in the 80s, my buddy had a boom box. That's what we'll now call it. I think we called it something else back in the day. But he had a boom box that had a little black and white TV in it. And it was the most amazing thing because with the antenna, you bring in, let's say, CBLT, the CBC affiliate or whatever. And there it is. Now, I'm sure it drained those double Ds or whatever. But my goodness gracious, having a TV in the boom box, broke our brains back in the 80s.
But generally, I think radio, I think the first thing radio has to do is stop calling itself radio. That's an old-fashioned word. That's a word, I don't know, how old are your children?
My oldest is 22.
Okay, so have you got it in the 15 and 14?
Yeah, well, there's 22, 20, and then we go down to 10 and 8. So nobody in the teenager.
The 20,
I'm without a teenager right now. You just made me realize.
The 20 or 22s, and they won't say this to you because, well, you're daddy, but radio is old-fashioned.
Right.
That was grandma's way of listening.
Right.
That was, dare I say, dad's way of listening.
100%.
And so they've got to start. You know what we call nythespirit.com?
What? Ice
cream shop. It's definitely not radio. It's on the internet, but I call it the ice cream shop because we have good things. And you can lick them and they're, oh, delicious. But I think radio has to reinvent itself in the same way that in the 40s it was all about plays and news, and in the 50s it reinvented itself to become where you heard the top 40 songs of the day.
Right.
And then in the late 60s along came this thing called FM. Oh my God, you could listen to the Beatles. And it was like, oh my goodness, you can hear all the instruments coming out of two different speakers, and well, let's do some acid, And so, but it has to reinvent itself, and I don't think that the people currently in charge know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to do it either. I'm an old man.
Well, I mean, the great disruptor, which you embraced with Iceberg and now with nythespirit.com. So you were sort of on the bleeding edge of this the whole time. You can give me the props. I can give them right back to you. But the great disruptor, of course, is the internet.
Yes.
So I'm okay.
Iceberg was first of its kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really was. And what a machine it was. I mean, we had 12 different radio, I won't call them radio because I hate that word, but we had 12 different channels. We had Illinois, which was rap and hip-hop and all that sort of thing. We had Groove, which was, of course, Don Burns and Headley.
Right.
Doing dance. We had
DJ Trance.
Too Cool for Radio, which was Rob Bolton. We had prime time, which was Gary Cormier doing live stuff 24/7
Wow.
and full video. And this was like what year was this? It was like the year 1999 or something.
Late 90s, yeah.
So Iceberg was, unfortunately, and the listenership showed that, is it was way, way too far ahead of itself.
Bleeding edge, I call that. You're just ahead of, you're too early.
Yes. And
It plagues us visionaries, David. Sometimes we're too early.
and now, we have things such as Spotify, but Spotify is just a jukebox.
Right.
In the truest sense of the word. And I think it's fine, and that's what the young people are finding, the new music, and I applaud anything that allows young people to find new music. As for nythespirit.com, we have a new music show hosted by James, and you'll hear stuff, all the music that he plays, you won't hear on new music on radio.
Right.
Or on TV. But Ivor Hamilton, we know how far he goes. Ivor he's still a punk rocker in his own mind, and that's where his music's at. And each of the DJs, they bring forth their own ears, their own loves, and when the DJs aren't on, the stream is going 24/7. And we literally have thousands and thousands and thousands of songs, much of it from the 80s.
nythespirit.com, everybody, if you're looking for that. And why wouldn't you be? A couple of quick hits on the way out. I've taken so much of your time. But a fun fact, we did talk about this your first visit, but a fun fact is that you replaced Alex Trebek as the host of Music Hop. I just brought up the CBC television affiliate here in this market, CBLT. But since you were here, Alex has taken his, what's your phrase? He takes his wings?
Put on his wings.
He put on his wings. I like the way you say that. But that is a fun fact that you replaced Alex Trebek as the host of Music Hop.
Well, actually, for the first year, Alex and I co-hosted the show. I called Music Hop, and it was a full net. It was Monday through Friday, 5 nights a week. And each night it came from a different city. On Thursday, it came from Toronto. And one of the guys who formed the Guess Who was the original host. Chad Allen was the original host out of Winnipeg.
Shaking all over.
Yeah. I can't remember who was hosting Vancouver. But anyway, Alex and I shared the show for the first year. We co-hosted together. We got to know each other. We'd spent 2 or 3 days a week together.
Wow.
And because with rehearsals and all the rest of that sort of thing. And then when the second season started, the second year, Alex fell down with appendicitis. And he ended up in the hospital, and I took the show temporarily as myself, just me hosting. Alex decided that he didn't want to come back, and I took the show over, and I carried on for 4 or 5 more years. Alex was a very warm individual, not a music person like myself would have been. He was just a guy who liked being on TV. The thing about game shows, because Alex was one of the most successful game show hosts ever. The thing about game show hosts, and this is why some make it and some don't. A good game show host knows one thing. And that one thing is the show is not about him or her. The show is about the game. That's why Pat, what's his name, lasted for 30. Sajak lasted for 30 years. I'm not sure Seacrest will.
Now, since we brought up Alex Trebek, that makes me think of Jeopardy, and I'm wondering 2 things. One, did you watch Jeopardy?
I watch Jeopardy still.
You still watch it. Okay, yeah. Ken Jennings is doing an okay job?
Ken Jennings is doing it because he understands. It's about the show, not him. And he's very good at it. It has become a little different over the past year or 2. They're simplifying it a little.
Are they dumbing it down? Because
That's what I mean by simplify.
That's the kiss of death for a show like
my
Jeopardy.
feeling is that, and they're holding these silly contests where they're the top 5 and they'll go on for months.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is, and this is only just me thinking out loud, they aren't getting enough people who are enrolling as contestants or who are good enough to be contestants. So they've invented this new thing where, the champions, and there'll be 5 of them, and they'll compete for like 6 months.
You might be right. You might be right. Absolutely. Matea Roach did a great job, and she's a local. Well, now she lives here. Or they live here, sorry. They live here now. Now, Jeopardy, one last question, because I'm thinking of a CFNY personality who appeared on Jeopardy. You know, it wasn't Pete or Geets, okay?
I know.
Yeah, so Pete and Geets, your morning show, and you worked with them at Chum FM, and we covered all that in episode 106.
Yeah.
So go to 106, you get the whole Pete and Geets story. It's funny because I work with the sports guy, Fred Patterson, who came up earlier when Mike Hannafin said in his note. The news guy was Mike Stafford. Do you have any contact with Mike Stafford these days?
Mike, the closest we get is on Facebook and or some other social media where I'm aware of what's going on with him. We chat once in a while. I send him a birthday present or birthday greetings, that kind of thing. Mike was an extremely brilliant news person. He deserves to be a news director in a radio or a TV station somewhere, somehow. He went on Jeopardy. I remember it well because we were in Kennedy Road, and I don't think he won.
No, he did not win.
But
he got a question wrong. He kind of kicks himself to this because I should point out, since he was let go by Chorus and that whole situation, he's been in this basement twice since then. So we do get periodic updates. But the answer to the question that he got wrong, I believe, was Kennedy. It was JFK. Right. And he kicked himself because he worked on Kennedy Road. So, he should have got it. He didn't get it, and he's probably still haunted by that. But so you're still Facebook friends of Mike, and I do periodically reach out myself to see how Mike is doing. He's had better days.
He's been going through a bit of but I think what I'm seeing now is I am seeing the return of Mike Stafford.
Oh.
I'm seeing the return of the guy who believes in himself, the guy who has someplace to be. And as I said, he belongs in a newsroom somewhere in this country.
We hope Mike Stafford gets his mojo back, and I look forward to getting him back in this basement for an update. He's got a lot of fans out there. All right, this is really the last thing, and then if you have anything else you want to say, otherwise, I got to tell you, David, I didn't think we could top your first appearance, but this matched it, and that's one of my favorite episodes of all time. So thank you for being here.
You're too kind, Ray. You're much too kind.
I've been told that, David. Okay, I'm working on it. Okay, I'm going to be more of a dink. Okay, but if I take us back to 1973, would you be willing to share a little of the story of how you helped Pink Floyd come to Toronto and, Michael Coles, and then maybe share that story, and Dark Side of the Moon?
I started playing Pink Floyd originally when I was at Chum FM in Montreal, and they were not, they were extremely progressive. And if you hadn't done a hit or two of acid, you didn't bother watching or listening to them. And then when I came to Toronto to Chum FM, and one night I was doing my show, and the record promo guy, suddenly opened the door, and he was in the studio. And the Chum FM studios were huge, by the way, just massive things. And he walks in, and there was a sofa there, and he sits down. And I'm doing my music, and we're kind of talking. And he said, "Oh, by the way, I've got something for you." "Oh, what's that?" And he pulls out the album. And he said, "Dark Side of the Moon." And I went, what's Dark Side of the Moon? He said, it's going to be the new release from Pink Floyd. And it's not coming out for 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm giving it to you now. He didn't say you can't play it. So whatever was playing on the air finished. And I had set it up on the third turntable. And I opened the microphone and introduced for the first time Dark Side of the Moon. And it was the first time it had ever been played anywhere in the world. Even the UK didn't have it. Wow. And so I had about a 2 to 3 week jump on it. That night, I was hearing it as everyone else was hearing it. I was hearing it for the very first time. And I was advised by the promo guy, it tracks, which means there's no space between songs. And he said it tracks, so if you want to let it go. So I let the full side go. My mind was boggled. I then, when it was over, I opened my mic and did a little talk. And while I was talking, I flipped it over, put the needle up, cued it, and said, here's side 2. And I let it roll. Wow. And when we got to the end of that, I said, I don't remember exactly what I said. Obviously, I sometimes don't remember my own name, but I said, that something like this. That was pretty good. I may have even used the F word. I don't know. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play it again. And I played it for its full self a second time. Wow. That night. And then Pink Floyd went on sale. Soon after that, it was about the time, 2 or 3 weeks later, when the album was due to come out, that they decided to announce that Pink Floyd was going to tour. So I started to promote that. The promoters, CPI, Michael Cole and David Walensky, they weren't sure. Although they were pretty brilliant gentlemen when it came to music. I started to promote it on my show, and in those days, the tickets went on sale on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. You couldn't phone in. You had to line up to buy them. And it was at a place called Bass, B-A-S-S. I used to call it Bass. And you'd go to the Bass, and there were 7 or 8, I don't know how many, Bass offices throughout the city of Toronto.
Right.
And people would line up for 2 days in advance. Saturday morning, they went on sale at 10 o'clock. I'm at home. I was living on Gloucester at the time. And it's around 11:30 Saturday morning. I'm still in bed sleeping. Because I was doing Saturday evenings even then. I was doing 6 nights those days. And my phone rings. Hello? Hi, David, it's Michael. Hi, Michael, what's up? He said, the show's sold out. I said, Michael, it's only 11:30. It went on sale at 10. He said, yes, the show is sold out.
45 minutes to sell out that show at Maple Leaf Gardens.
I don't remember the year that happened.
73.
73.
But I have one last question here. So when you play Dark Side of the Moon twice, and this is before the world premiere, okay? You beat the world premiere because no one told you couldn't play it, and you know.
That's right.
I believe Roger King says, play what you want or whatnot. But Capitol Records, did they give you like a wrist slap, or did you hear from Capitol Records?
I have no recollection of that. I was chatting with Michael back when they opened the Pink Floyd exhibition at the C&E grounds back a year or so ago.
Right.
And Michael hinted, and I have no idea if this is true or not. Michael hinted, because I said I was hosting the press conference for that, is what I was doing. And before the press conference, we were sitting at a table, and someone said, "Oh, Marsden, you got to do the world premiere of Dark Side of the Moon." I said, "Yeah, I did." And Michael hinted, "You know, we set that up, don't you, David?"
That's called revisionist history.
I don't know if it was if he was teasing. I don't know if he was making fun. But no, I never heard from the label. And the promo guy, he brought it in. It was like, "I've got a gift for you," and he showed it. So,
but you know, if the promo guy gives you an album and doesn't explicitly say like this is embargoed until this date, you can't play it, then you did what I would do. You got to play that.
Yeah, you know that. I'm not too much of a rebel, but I have a little bit of rebel in me.
A little bit of a rebel streak. Here's a throwback here as we say goodbye.
So that you too can put a brown paper bag in your hip pocket. You gotta see what I got in it for tomorrow night, boy. I got some good things. So pass it on, bring along your friends, and join me 6 o'clock tomorrow night. I'll be at your house. I hope you're home. From David Marsden, CFNY-FM 102.1 Toronto. Good night, everybody. Have yourself a good one, won't you? Brad is next to take care of business.
Dave, good night to you. I hope we see each other again soon, and thanks again for in-person round 2, but of course you were on episode 1021, which I think people should just go straight there and hear the origin story of CFNY and more about that great station you were at the helm of for so many years. Thanks again for this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. But where did you get that last tape? My goodness.
Spiritofradio.ca.
No, it's spiritofradio.com.
Oh.
No, it's actually nythespirit.com.
Well, that's yours. There's a fan site out there with the...
oh, yeah.
That's where they got some archives there.
And it's a good one.
It's a good one. You can steal the odd, borrow the odd sound check there.
Thank you, Mike. This means a lot to me. I really do appreciate it.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,565th show. 1565 episodes, but none better than this one right here. I tell you that. Go to torontomike.com to subscribe and find out more, including where you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all those places. Much love to all who made this possible. Again, that's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta. They're hosting us November 30th. Come on out to Palma's Kitchen from noon to 3. We'll feed you. Palma will feed you. Great Lakes will make sure you get a beer, and we'll record an episode, and you can hop on the mic if you like. It'll be great fun. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Raymond James Canada, Moneris, and Ridley Funeral Home. Tomorrow is FOTM Cast with Cam Gordon and Tyler Campbell, but Friday is the return in person in the basement of Stephen Brunt. See you all then.
For me and you, but I'm a much better man for having known you. Oh, you know that's true.